On a building's upper level, a worker in a red shirt walks dangerously close to an unprotected edge. There are no guardrails or safety lines in place. In a moment of distraction, he takes a step back without looking, misjudging his position, and plummets to the ground. This tragic fall highlights why fall protection is non-negotiable when working at heights. Any open edge requires guardrails or the mandatory use of personal fall arrest systems. Engineering controls are far more reliable than relying on situational awareness alone. At another construction site, a worker standing on a concrete ledge attempts to cross a gap using a single, unsecured wooden plank as a bridge. The instant he transfers his weight onto the plank, it flips and gives way beneath him, causing him to fall. This incident is a stark reminder of the dangers of using makeshift walkways. All temporary platforms must be properly engineered, secured at both ends, and load-rated to prevent catastrophic failure. In a large industrial yard, a forklift operator moves a large bin that completely obstructs his forward view. Meanwhile, two workers walk through the active vehicle area, seemingly oblivious to the moving machinery. As the forklift makes a wide turn, the operator, blind to the pedestrian directly in his path, strikes the man and runs him over. His colleague can only watch in horror. This devastating incident reveals multiple critical safety failures. Operators must never travel with a load that obstructs their view. If unavoidable, they must travel in reverse or use a spotter. Furthermore, dedicated, clearly marked pedestrian walkways must be established to segregate people from heavy machinery. From a scooter's point of view, we see the rider following a large cement mixer on a narrow road bordered by a rock face. The rider makes the dangerous decision to overtake on the right shoulder, where there is no lane. The space rapidly narrows, leading to a direct collision with the rock wall. This illustrates a vital traffic safety rule. Never overtake a large vehicle on the right, especially in a non-designated lane due to massive blind spots. A female worker in a red safety vest stands near a large industrial mixing machine, placing her hand on it. Without warning, the machine begins to move forward. She's instantly knocked off her feet and pulled underneath the heavy equipment. The primary failure here is a lack of a proper lockout-tagout procedure. Before any maintenance or interaction in the immediate vicinity of such machinery, it must be de-energized and locked out to prevent unexpected startup. Inside a textile factory, a man is operating a large warping machine with a massive rotating beam. As he works near the intake, his clothing gets caught by the powerful roller. He is instantly pulled off his feet and violently spun around as he's dragged into the machinery. His co-workers rush to stop the machine, but the incident has already occurred. This horrific accident underscores the danger of wearing loose clothing around rotating equipment. Furthermore, machines of this type must have emergency stops within easy reach and proper guarding to prevent any possibility of contact with moving parts. In a steel warehouse, a worker stands directly underneath a massive coil of sheet metal being moved by an overhead crane. Suddenly, the clamp holding the multi-ton roll fails, and the coil drops, instantly crushing the man below. This is an absolute violation of the most basic overhead lifting rule. Never, under any circumstances, position yourself under a suspended load. Safe zones must be clearly established and enforced. 3 workers stand near a stack of heavy steel I-beams resting on supports. The stack appears to be poorly secured. One man begins to unhook a strap, and the loss of that support causes the entire pile to become unstable. The heavy beams slide off their supports and cascade to the ground, pinning one of the workers underneath. His colleagues desperately try to move the immensely heavy beams to free him. This demonstrates a critical failure in material storage. Heavy, unsecured loads are a constant hazard. They must be properly stacked, chocked, and secured, and bindings should only be removed when the load is stabilized by a lifting device. A woman in a lab coat stands in the lobby of a clinic as a visitor enters through a large, frameless glass door. As the visitor closes the door behind her, it suddenly detaches from its overhead pivot hinge. The massive sheet of tempered glass falls and explodes on impact with the floor, sending shards everywhere. The employee inside is startled, but manages to avoid the main impact. This type of failure points to improper installation or worn-out hardware. The fittings for heavy glass doors require regular inspection and maintenance to ensure they can safely support the weight. Inside a factory, one worker is bent over near a long textile machine. The worker's loose clothing gets caught on a low-profile rotating roller. He is instantly flipped and violently dragged into the machinery. This is another severe entanglement incident caused by an unguarded rotating part. Even seemingly slow-moving components can be incredibly dangerous. Machine guarding and prohibiting loose clothing are critical preventative measures that were ignored here. At a construction site, workers are guiding a crane-lifted concrete bucket into position. One man stands directly in the load's swing path to maneuver it by hand. The load shifts unexpectedly, striking him squarely in the head and knocking him to the ground unconscious. Suspended loads must only be guided using taglines from a safe distance. Placing yourself in the path of a swinging load puts you at the mercy of physics, a risk no one should ever take. A worker guides a thick metal wire onto a large, rotating spooling machine. His gloved hand gets too close and is caught between the wire and the spool. The machine's torque instantly pulls him off his feet, slamming him against the frame as his arm is dragged into the mechanism. This type of entanglement happens in a split second. Guiding materials should be done with appropriate tools from a safe distance, and all rotating parts require proper guarding to prevent any possibility of contact. In a commercial bakery, a worker is cleaning around a massive industrial dough mixer while the safety cage is lifted up. As she bends down, a co-worker walks up to the machine and, without checking his surroundings, activates it. The powerful mixing hook starts to rotate, catching the woman and pulling her into the bowl. The other workers rush in panic to stop the machine and help their gravely injured colleague. This is a catastrophic failure to follow lockout-tagout procedures. The machine should have been completely de-energized and locked before any cleaning began. The safety guard was bypassed, and the operator failed to ensure the area was clear before starting the equipment. In a processing facility, a massive bulk bag of granular material is suspended from a hoist. A worker climbs onto a metal cart, positioning himself directly underneath the 1-ton bag to cut it open from the bottom. The moment he punctures the bag, the lifting loops fail, and the entire load collapses on top of him, burying him completely. His co-workers are forced into a desperate and lengthy rescue, digging through the material by hand to find him. This is a fatal mistake, born from ignoring the most fundamental rule of lifting: never work under a suspended load. The bag should have been securely placed in a proper discharging station before being opened. This tragic event demonstrates how a shortcut can lead to the ultimate price, leaving colleagues to deal with the horrifying aftermath of a decision that took only seconds to make. In a commercial kitchen, a deep fryer catches fire. A worker panics and throws a container of liquid, almost certainly water, onto the flames. This causes a violent eruption, spreading the grease fire. After the initial mistake, he reacts correctly by grabbing a fire extinguisher to put out the blaze. This is a crucial lesson. Never use water on a grease fire. Water vaporizes instantly, spreading burning oil. The proper response is to smother the fire with a lid or use a Class K fire extinguisher specifically designed for kitchen fires. Inside a material processing facility, a worker manages heavy stone slabs positioned near a cutting machine. Suddenly, a large slab becomes unstable and tips forward due to a shift in weight, creating a hazardous situation for the operator in the fall zone. This incident highlights the critical need to secure heavy loads during processing and reminds us to never stand in the direct line of fire where unstable materials might fall. In a chemical processing plant, workers are inspecting a large industrial tank when an apparent valve failure causes a sudden, rapid release of pressure. The resulting release of energy disrupts the immediate area, serving as a stark reminder that pressure vessels require rigorous maintenance. Workers must always verify pressure levels and follow strict lockout procedures before approaching such equipment. An auto mechanic is working near an open service pit while a vehicle is being positioned nearby. The driver appears to lose control, possibly confusing the pedals, causing the car to accelerate suddenly into the pit area. To prevent such accidents, clear communication between drivers and ground guides is vital, and physical barriers should be used around open pits during vehicle maneuvering. A group of workers moves a tall metal scaffold structure across a paved area without noticing the overhead environment. As they push the frame, the top makes contact with high-voltage power lines, sending an electrical current down to the workers. This scenario emphasizes the importance of surveying the area for overhead hazards and maintaining a safe distance from power lines at all times. A vehicle is being loaded onto a flatbed tow truck when the securing mechanism fails, causing the car to roll rapidly backward off the ramp toward the operator. This mechanical failure illustrates why operators should never stand directly behind or below a load being winched. Regular equipment checks on cables and winches are essential to prevent failure during recovery operations. At a construction site, a crane lifts a bundle of heavy metal beams when the rigging suddenly slips. The load detaches mid-air and falls to the ground near the workers. This incident underscores that proper rigging techniques and load balancing are essential for crane safety, and establishing a clear exclusion zone underneath lifted loads is mandatory to protect personnel. In a busy commercial kitchen, staff transport a large, open container of hot liquid when one worker loses their footing. The container tips over, spilling the high-temperature contents onto the floor and the personnel. To minimize thermal risks, slip-resistant footwear is crucial, and carts with sealed lids should always be used when transporting hot substances. At a metal recycling yard, a worker introduces an ignition source near a sealed metal drum. Residual fumes inside the container ignite instantly, causing a rapid expansion of gas and a concussive blast. This serves as a critical warning never to apply heat or open flames to sealed drums without verifying they are completely empty and purged of hazardous residues. A driver prepares to unload a truck filled with heavy timber logs, but as the side restraints are released, the load shifts due to gravity. One of the heavy timbers falls outward, striking the individual standing next to the truck. When releasing cargo straps, workers must always assume the load has shifted and stand clear or use remote release mechanisms to avoid the fall path. A machinist working with a long metal bar on a rotating lathe gets their loose clothing caught on the spinning material. Although they pull away just in time, this near miss demonstrates that loose clothing, gloves, and jewelry are major hazards near rotating machinery. Wearing proper fitted work attire is a primary defense against entanglement. An elderly woman stands near the open rear door of a city bus. Before she is safely clear of the vehicle, the bus driver begins to pull away from the curb. The sudden movement causes the woman to lose her balance and fall backward. striking her head hard on the pavement. The bus continues on its route, the driver apparently unaware of what has just happened. This highlights a critical failure of the driver to ensure all passengers are safely clear of the bus before proceeding. Checking mirrors and waiting for passengers to be on the curb is essential to prevent these falls. On a dirt road at a construction or drilling site, two workers stand beside their small utility truck. Uphill and behind them, a large front-end loader begins to reverse. The operator fails to see the vehicle and workers in their massive blind spot. The loader continues backwards, completely running over and crushing the small truck and the two workers beneath it, who had no chance to escape. This devastating accident shows a complete breakdown of sight awareness. Heavy equipment operators must have a clear 360-degree view or use a spotter before moving, and workers on foot must never linger in the blind spots of large machinery. In a car service bay, a mechanic works under the open hood of a car being converted to run on compressed gas. Without warning, the red gas cylinder inside the engine compartment fails catastrophically. It shoots out of the car like a rocket, ricochets off the ground, and triggers a massive fiery explosion that engulfs a nearby vehicle. Working with compressed gas systems like LPG or CNG is extremely hazardous. This was likely a tank failure from damage or overpressurization, and all work on such systems requires specialized training to prevent an explosive decompression. A busy street market is set up dangerously close to a live railway line. As a long freight train passes through the area, a person standing too near the tracks is struck by the locomotive and pulled under the moving train cars. This dashcam footage captures a busy highway with congested traffic. A motorcyclist attempts to weave between lanes, trying to get ahead. The rider makes a critical error by trying to cut in front of a large tanker truck from the right side, placing them directly in the driver's significant blind spot. The truck, moving forward with traffic, collides with the unseen motorcycle, pulling the rider under its wheels. Riders must always assume they are invisible to truck drivers and avoid maneuvering in these dangerous no zones. On what appears to be a normal day, a high-angle security camera captures a street view in front of a multi-story building. Without any warning, the building's entire facade detaches and collapses in a massive cloud of dust and debris, crashing down onto the street and crushing the parked motorcycles below. This type of catastrophic structural failure points to severe issues like neglected maintenance or a potential gas leak, underscoring the necessity of regular building inspections. On an elevated platform at an industrial plant, workers are positioned near a large piece of equipment. One man handles a flexible hose connected to the system. Suddenly, a coupling fails, and the pressurized hose whips around, dousing him with a powerful jet of chemicals. He is immediately engulfed in a vapor cloud and collapses. This incident underscores the extreme danger of pressurized systems. Hoses and their fittings must undergo regular inspection for wear and be properly secured to prevent catastrophic failure. Appropriate PPE, including full-face shields and chemical-resistant suits, is non-negotiable. In a textile factory, a worker tends to a massive fabric winding machine. He reaches over the large, rapidly spinning roll to make an adjustment. In an instant, his arm is caught, and the machine's immense power pulls his entire body in, wrapping him violently within the roll of fabric. His co-workers rush to his aid, desperately trying to halt the machine. For over a minute, they struggle with the controls and attempt to manually reverse the powerful mechanism to free their trapped colleague. This horrific entanglement is a direct result of inadequate machine guarding. A protective barrier with an interlock switch would have shut the machine down. This also serves as a grim reminder to never reach over moving parts. The chaotic rescue highlights the need for clear and practiced emergency stop procedures for all heavy machinery. Inside a busy workshop or warehouse, employees are engaged in their daily tasks. Without warning, a violent explosion erupts in the middle of the workspace, sending a shockwave and debris flying in all directions. The likely culprit is a catastrophic failure of a pressurized gas cylinder. Such cylinders must be stored securely upright, chained in place, and kept away from heat sources or areas where they could suffer physical impact. In a vast warehouse, an operator drives an electric pallet jack down an aisle lined with towering storage racks. He appears to be inattentive or fatigued as the vehicle slowly veers to the right. It makes a seemingly minor impact with the base of a shelving upright. But that's all it takes. The collision triggers a devastating domino effect, bringing down the entire aisle of heavy shelving in a matter of seconds. The operator barely manages to run to safety as tons of product come crashing down. This shows why rack protectors are vital and, more importantly, that operators must remain alert at all times, as fatigue can have catastrophic consequences. A worker is feeding material into a green industrial rolling machine. He is sitting directly on the machine's frame, an incredibly dangerous position right next to the powerful intake rollers. As he guides the material, his hand gets caught. He is instantly pulled in and crushed by the machine. This fatal incident was entirely preventable. The machine had no guarding at its point of operation, a fundamental safety violation. Workers must never place themselves on or near moving machinery. Guards, light curtains, or two-hand controls are essential to prevent such tragedies. In a factory setting, a worker operates a large rolling press. As he guides material into the machine's intake, his hand is suddenly caught. He is violently and instantly pulled completely into the powerful rollers. This tragic incident highlights a critical lack of point-of-operation guarding. Safety interlocks, light curtains, or two-hand controls are essential safeguards to prevent such immediate and horrific accidents. From a high vantage point on a construction site, a crane is lifting a platform with 3 workers on it. Suddenly, the rigging gives way, and the platform violently tilts. One of the workers loses his footing and plummets several stories to the ground below. Riding on loads or platforms not specifically designed for personnel is an extremely high-risk activity and is prohibited on most job sites. Only certified man baskets should be used for lifting personnel. At a port, a crane is lifting a large hopper over a truck. Multiple workers are standing around and on the truck, directly underneath the suspended load. Suddenly, the rigging fails, and the multi-ton hopper plummets, crushing the truck's cab and striking at least one person. The number 1 rule of crane safety is to never position yourself under a suspended load. A clearly marked exclusion zone must be established and maintained for all lifting operations. This incident was caused by a failure in the lifting gear, underscoring the need for certified riggers and thorough pre-lift inspections. At an excavation site, several workers are standing perilously close to the edge of a deep pit while an excavator works above them. The operator swings the bucket, either misjudging the distance or not seeing the worker below, and knocks one man directly into the excavation. This highlights a severe lack of communication and site control. Workers on foot should never be in the swing radius of heavy equipment, and operators must ensure their path is clear before moving. In a heavy manufacturing plant, workers are gathered around a massive engine assembly being lifted by an overhead crane. The rigging suddenly gives way, and the entire multi-ton apparatus crashes to the floor, shattering on impact and narrowly missing several people. The incident was caused by a catastrophic rigging failure. All lifting equipment, including slings and shackles, must be inspected before each use and rated for a weight far exceeding the load. A crane operator lowers a large bundle of sacks into an open pit in a factory floor. A female worker stands on the edge to guide the load. As the heavy bundle swings, its momentum pushes her off balance, and she falls backward into the hole. Workers should never use their bodies to directly guide a suspended load. Taglines should always be used to control the load from a safe distance, away from fall hazards. Two technicians are working on a large CNC machine. As one of them leans in and touches a component, he receives a severe electrical shock, causing him to convulse and collapse. This points to either damaged wiring or a failure to properly de-energize and lock out the machine before beginning service work. Inside what appears to be a paper recycling facility, a worker is manually pushing material into the opening of a large industrial pulper. He leans too far over the unguarded opening, loses his footing, and is instantly pulled into the powerful machine. A large plume of dust and steam erupts from the machine. This tragedy was entirely preventable. The machine's feed opening must have been equipped with proper guarding and a feed system, like a conveyor belt, to eliminate the need for any worker to be near the point of operation. A worker wearing a hard hat walks backward into the path of a reversing cement mixer truck. The driver, likely unable to see him in the blind spot, continues to back up, striking the man and knocking him to the ground. All large vehicles must be equipped with backup alarms, and drivers should use a spotter when reversing in areas with pedestrian traffic. Pedestrians, in turn, must remain aware of their surroundings. A worker enters the safety enclosure of a large industrial robotic arm while it is still operational. The robot activates, moving swiftly along its programmed path, and pins the man against a stationary part of the cell. Safety interlocks on gates are designed to prevent this. They must never be bypassed. In a garage, two mechanics are working on a large, inflated truck tire that is not in a safety cage. The tire suddenly explodes with catastrophic force, throwing both men across the workshop. Inflating large tires must always be done within a reinforced safety cage to contain the explosive energy in case of a blowout. A worker stands next to a flatbed trailer heavily loaded with stacked steel I-beams. The load, which is not properly secured, suddenly shifts and slides off the side of the trailer, burying the man underneath. All heavy loads must be secured with appropriate chains or straps to prevent any movement during transport or unloading. Inside a factory, a worker stands directly beneath a large metal sheet being moved by an overhead crane with a clamp-style lift. The clamps suddenly fail, and the heavy sheet drops directly onto the worker. The lesson here is absolute. Never, under any circumstances, stand or work under a suspended load. All lifting operations require a cleared area below, and workers should use taglines from a safe distance to guide the load, eliminating the risk of being in the drop zone. At a residential construction site, a mini excavator is digging a deep trench right alongside the foundation of a concrete wall. Several workers are in the immediate vicinity. The excavation undermines the wall's support, causing it to suddenly collapse into the trench, burying one worker and sending others scrambling. This is a critical failure in excavation safety. Never dig in a way that compromises the structural integrity of nearby buildings or walls. Proper shoring, sloping, and professional assessment are required before beginning any such work. Inside a vast recycling facility, a person is walking through an area with huge piles of plastic waste. An approaching front-end loader, tasked with moving the material, has a significant blind spot. The operator does not see the person and proceeds to push them with a full bucket, burying them under a mountain of refuse. This highlights the critical need for strict separation of pedestrian traffic and heavy machinery in industrial environments. High-visibility vests and clear, designated walkways are essential to prevent such tragic accidents. In an incredibly dangerous act, a worker is lowered into a deep, narrow trench while standing in the bucket of an excavator. As he reaches the bottom, the unstable, unshored walls of the trench give way, burying him instantly. This scene shows two fatal errors. First, machinery buckets should never be used to transport personnel. Second, any trench of this depth requires proper shoring or benching to prevent a collapse. This was a completely preventable tragedy caused by ignoring fundamental safety rules. In a factory, a worker enters the safety-fenced area of an automated production line to make an adjustment. Without warning, the robotic stacking machine activates, moving along its track and crushing the worker against a stationary part of the line. This is a deadly failure of lockout-tagout procedures. Before any worker enters a machine's operational space, the equipment must be completely de-energized, locked, and tagged to ensure it cannot be started accidentally. A man is operating a tracked post-hole drilling rig in a grassy field next to a property line. As he drills, the auger strikes a high-pressure underground gas line. A massive explosion of dirt and gas erupts, violently throwing the machine and operator backward. This dangerous event underscores the universal rule: call before you dig. Always have underground utilities professionally marked before any excavation or drilling to prevent life-threatening encounters with gas, electric, or water lines. On a snow-covered street, a front-end loader is clearing snow near parked cars. A pedestrian, walking on the street due to the snow-covered sidewalk, moves into the loader's path. The operator, likely dealing with blind spots, makes a turn and strikes the person, knocking them down. This illustrates the heightened risks in adverse weather. Operators of heavy machinery must exercise extreme caution, while pedestrians should make themselves visible and avoid the operational area of such equipment. In a warehouse, a worker stands in a marked walkway, completely absorbed by his phone. Meanwhile, a tugger train approaches from behind. The driver initiates a turn, causing the trailing carts to swing wide and collide with the distracted worker, knocking him to the ground. This incident is a lesson in mutual responsibility and situational awareness. Pedestrians must always be aware of their surroundings, especially around mobile equipment, and operators must ensure their path is clear before turning. Inside a factory, two workers are performing maintenance within a robotic cell, apparently having bypassed the safety gates. One worker leans over a component just as the large robotic arm activates unexpectedly. The arm swings around and crushes the man's head and upper body against a fixed part of the machinery. This is a horrific example of why bypassing safety interlocks is forbidden. Proper lockout-tagout procedures are the only way to safely service robotic equipment, guaranteeing all energy sources are isolated before entry. On a freshly paved road, a group of workers is standing near the curb as a large road grader passes by. Suddenly, one of the grader's massive tires explodes with tremendous force, sending a shockwave and debris flying. The workers are knocked off their feet by the blast. This highlights the hidden dangers of high-pressure tires on heavy machinery. A catastrophic tire failure can be as violent as a bomb. The lesson is the critical importance of regular tire inspection and maintenance to prevent overpressurization or damage that could lead to a deadly blowout. In a narrow alleyway next to a construction site, pedestrians and workers move about. High above, a large blue panel is improperly secured to the scaffolding. Without warning, the panel detaches and plummets to the ground, narrowly missing several people before striking a worker. This incident is a stark reminder of the dangers of unsecured overhead materials. All items at height must be securely fastened, and exclusion zones should be established below to prevent anyone from entering a potential drop zone. At a high-rise construction site, a crane is lifting a load. A worker on the ground, standing directly under the operation, gets his clothing snagged by the rigging as the load ascends. He is hoisted dozens of feet into the air before losing his grip and falling. This tragic event underscores multiple safety failures. Workers should never be positioned under a suspended load, and proper rigging procedures must ensure no loose equipment or clothing can become entangled. Furthermore, this demonstrates the absolute necessity for fall protection equipment when working at height. At a loading dock, two men are attempting to close the rear doors of a large shipping container. As they struggle with the latches, the truck, which is not properly secured, begins to roll backward. One man fails to get out of the way in time and is horrifically crushed between the trailer and the dock. This fatal incident was entirely preventable. The number one rule when working with trailers is to always secure the vehicle with wheel chocks before any loading or unloading activities begin, to prevent any unintended movement. In a large metal fabrication facility, a group of workers is elevated in a makeshift man basket attached to the forks of a forklift. As the operator maneuvers the unstable setup, the forklift loses its balance and tips over, sending the workers crashing to the ground. This demonstrates a severe misuse of equipment. Forklifts are designed for lifting materials, not people. Only purpose-built aerial work platforms, or man lifts, which provide a stable and secure base, should be used for elevating personnel, ensuring proper training and adherence to weight limits. A forklift operator is unloading a tall, unstable pallet of bottled drinks from the back of a truck. As he backs away, the load begins to tip. The driver makes the fatal mistake of jumping from his cab to try and manually steady the falling pallet. But he is instantly overwhelmed by the weight and crushed beneath it. This is a tragic lesson in instinct versus training. The correct procedure is to let the load fall. No product is worth a human life. Always prioritize personal safety and stay clear of shifting or falling materials. In a stone or woodworking shop, a worker is standing near a series of large, heavy slabs that are stored vertically without proper support. When he attempts to move one, it triggers a domino effect, causing the entire stack to topple over onto him. The immense weight leaves him with no chance of escape. This incident shows a critical failure in material storage. Heavy, unstable items like slabs must be stored in specifically designed A-frame racks that prevent them from tipping and ensure they can be handled safely one at a time. In a busy shipping port at night, a straddle carrier is positioning a container next to a tall stack. The operator misjudges the distance and collides with the stack, destabilizing it completely. A cascade of containers topples over, crashing down onto a nearby yard truck and its driver. This highlights the need for extreme precision and situational awareness in container yards. Operators must manage their speed and maintain safe clearance distances at all times to prevent catastrophic chain reactions. During an unloading operation, a worker stands on a flatbed truck next to a massive, unsecured pipe. As workers on the ground begin to move it, the pipe suddenly rolls off the side of the truck, crushing the man standing in its path. This is a classic line-of-fire accident. When handling heavy, cylindrical objects, workers must never position themselves on the downhill side. Loads must be chocked and secured until a controlled offloading process, guided by machinery, can be initiated safely. Ann operates a large industrial lathe, leaning over the rapidly spinning chuck. His loose jacket sleeve gets snagged, and he is instantly and violently pulled into the machine, spinning at a terrifying speed before a coworker hits the emergency stop. This is a classic entanglement accident. The number one rule when working with rotating machinery is absolutely no loose clothing, untied long hair, or jewelry. These items can be grabbed in a fraction of a second. Additionally, a chuck shield could have prevented this contact. At a gas station next to a busy roundabout, a chaotic car accident occurs. One of the involved cars rolls backward, out of control, directly into the station forecourt, striking an unsuspecting attendant sitting in a chair. This incident underscores the risk of working near live traffic. Protective barriers, like bollards, are essential to shield work areas from errant vehicles. A large truck reverses toward a loading bay, while a pedestrian walks directly into its path from behind. The driver, with no visibility in this massive blind spot, continues backing up and runs the person over completely. This is a tragic and preventable blind spot accident. Large vehicles must be equipped with functioning backup alarms and cameras. Crucially, a dedicated spotter should always guide a reversing truck, maintaining constant visual contact with the driver. In a busy shipping yard, a man walks across the pavement while completely absorbed by his phone. He fails to notice an approaching forklift and steps directly into its path, getting struck and knocked down. This is a clear case of distracted walking in a high-risk environment. Using a phone while walking in an active yard with heavy machinery should be strictly forbidden. Pedestrians must maintain full situational awareness at all times. A mechanic performs welding work underneath a car on a lift. Sparks from his tool ignite a flammable liquid on the floor, likely spilled fuel, and the vehicle erupts into a massive ball of fire. The mechanic is forced to scramble to safety from the inferno. This is a failure of hot work safety procedures. Before any welding or grinding, the area must be completely cleared of all flammable materials, including liquids, vapors, and oily rags. A fire extinguisher must be within arm's reach, and it is also standard practice to disconnect the vehicle's battery. In an underground mine, a group of workers gathers to board an elevator cage. As the first 4 workers step inside, the entire cage structure suddenly breaks free from its lift mechanism and plunges into the dark shaft below. This is a catastrophic structural or mechanical failure of the highest order. Mine elevators, or cages, are subjected to extreme stress and harsh environmental conditions, requiring an exceptionally high standard of maintenance, inspection, and operational oversight. Redundant safety systems are supposed to prevent exactly this type of free fall, pointing to a critical lapse in safety protocols. On a snowy construction site, a crane lowers a long metal beam. A worker on the ground is unable to control the swinging load and is struck violently, getting knocked off his feet. Guiding suspended loads by hand is extremely risky. The correct and safe procedure is to use tag lines, long ropes attached to the load, that allow workers to maneuver it from a safe distance, well outside the potential swing or drop zone. 2 movers attempt to load a tall, heavy appliance into a small van. Moving it on a dolly, the appliance becomes top-heavy and unstable. As they struggle to control it, it tips over, crushing one of the men against the side of the van. Moving tall, top-heavy objects is incredibly dangerous, as their high center of gravity makes them prone to tipping. For a load this size, more personnel or proper lifting equipment like a liftgate should have been used. They underestimated the instability, leading to a fatal crushing injury. A forklift operator turns into the path of a rickshaw. The forks pierce the vehicle. In a busy industrial yard, a forklift operator attempts the difficult task of lifting a large, heavy, and awkwardly shaped pipe flange with only one fork. The load is dangerously unstable and severely off-center from the start. As the operator raises the mast, the forklift's center of gravity shifts dramatically. In a matter of seconds, The machine loses its balance and tips over sideways, trapping and crushing the operator in the cab underneath its immense weight. This tragic incident was caused by the improper lifting of an unbalanced and oversized load, far exceeding the forklift's rated capacity and stability. Such an object should have been moved using appropriate rigging with multiple attachment points and a crane, not a forklift, to prevent a catastrophic tip-over. During a circus performance in front of a live audience, an acrobat begins to ride a bicycle across a high wire. Midway through the act, the performer suddenly loses balance. Both he and the bicycle plummet to the hard stage below. High wire acts are incredibly dangerous, and this incident underscores the risk. The clear lack of a safety net or a personal fall arrest harness connected to a safety line made this fall unsurvivable. A young girl is seen in a garage, playing near a partially open metal roll-up door. She curiously reaches up and begins to pull the heavy door downward. Suddenly, the door's counterbalancing spring mechanism appears to fail catastrophically. The heavy door breaks free and free falls with tremendous speed and force, slamming shut and trapping the child underneath in an instant. This is a heartbreaking and preventable tragedy. Heavy, spring-loaded doors require regular inspection and maintenance to ensure their safety mechanisms are fully functional. Two pedestrians are standing on the very edge of a busy roadway, perilously close to passing traffic. A white bus approaches, and without slowing, it strikes both individuals, throwing them violently into the air. Standing this close to an active traffic lane leaves absolutely no margin for error or driver distraction. On a highway, a man is riding his motorcycle when a panicked bull suddenly runs into his path. The collision knocks the rider from his bike, throwing him directly into the lane of an oncoming truck, leaving no time for the truck driver to stop. An elderly woman attempts to cross a road while pulling a large wheeled trash can behind her. As she steps into the street, she moves directly into the path of an oncoming white SUV. The driver doesn't appear to see her, and the vehicle strikes her without slowing down. Inside a tire repair shop, two mechanics work on a large, unmounted tractor tire. As they attempt to inflate it without proper safety equipment, the tire's internal pressure builds to a critical point. It explodes with catastrophic force, creating a powerful concussive blast that throws the men. Inflating large tires is extremely dangerous due to the immense stored energy and must always be done inside a reinforced steel safety cage. At a railroad crossing, a scooter with two riders waits as the warning gates are down. Growing impatient, the driver decides to maneuver around the safety barrier and cross the tracks. As they enter the crossing, a train appears at high speed, giving them no chance to escape the collision. Railroad crossing gates and warning signals are absolute safety measures and must always be obeyed. Going around them is a fatal gamble. In a busy warehouse, a worker pushing a manual pallet jack enters an aisle. From the opposite direction, a forklift operator turns the corner, their attention focused elsewhere. The operator fails to see the pedestrian directly in their path and collides with them, knocking the person to the floor. This incident underscores the danger of blind corners. Convex mirrors, audible alarms on vehicles, and strictly enforced pedestrian walkways are vital for preventing such collisions. At a building facade, two men are working on a multi-level rolling scaffold. One worker is positioned on the top platform, attending to his tasks, while his partner is on the ground below. The worker at the base decides to reposition the scaffold. Instead of ensuring his colleague descends first, he begins to push the entire tall structure along the uneven sidewalk. The scaffold immediately becomes unstable, rocking back and forth precariously. He continues to push until the structure's center of gravity shifts too far, causing it to topple over completely. It crashes down with immense force, throwing the worker from the top platform onto the hard pavement below. This incident is a catastrophic failure of fundamental safety rules. Scaffolding must always be erected on solid, level ground and must never, under any circumstances, be moved while workers are on it. This dangerous shortcut resulted in a severe and easily avoidable accident. Inside a fenced-off automated work cell, a worker stands dangerously close to an active robotic arm. The large robot, programmed to move components, makes a sudden, swift movement toward the man. It mistakes the worker for a part, grabbing him by the head and violently slamming him into a stack of materials. This is precisely why safety cages and light curtains exist. No worker should ever enter the operational envelope of a robot without engaging full lockout-tagout procedures. In a nighttime loading bay, a truck driver stands near the back of his trailer as a forklift approaches with a pallet. The forklift operator, seemingly unaware of the driver's presence, drives forward without slowing down. The operator pins the driver between the powerful machine and the trailer, crushing him instantly. This devastating incident highlights the absolute need for clear communication and situational awareness. Forklift operators must always establish eye contact with pedestrians in their vicinity, and ground personnel should never place themselves in a potential crush zone. A mechanic crouches directly over a large truck tire while inflating it. Without any warning, the tire's structural integrity fails, resulting in a massive explosion. The sheer force of the blast launches the mechanic violently into the air. When inflating high-pressure tires, always use a safety inflation cage and a clip-on chuck with a long hose to maintain a safe distance. At a busy port, workers are loading a flatbed truck near the water's edge. A forklift operator, after placing a load, suddenly accelerates forward at high speed instead of reversing. The machine plunges off the pier, landing directly on a worker standing below and pushing him into the water. This appears to be a tragic case of pedal misapplication. In complex environments, operators must remain hyper-vigilant. Maintaining clear safety zones for pedestrians is essential to provide an escape route in case of operator error. In a factory setting, a worker operates a large rolling press. He reaches over the active machine, likely to clear a jam or adjust the material being fed into it. His arm gets caught in the powerful intake rollers, and in a horrific instant, he is pulled completely into the machine. This demonstrates the absolute necessity of proper machine guarding. All moving parts and pinch points must be covered. For any adjustments or maintenance, a complete lockout-tagout procedure must be performed to de-energize the equipment. In a mining tunnel, a worker pushes a heavy cart toward an elevator shaft. He opens the protective gate and, without verifying that the elevator car is actually there, pushes the cart into the void. He and the cart plummet down the open shaft. Safety interlocks that prevent gates from opening unless the elevator is present are critical. This tragic assumption highlights the rule to always look and confirm before you proceed. At a loading dock, a forklift operator begins to raise the forks. At that exact moment, a scooter carrying 2 people drives directly into their path, colliding hard with the rising steel forks. This incident highlights the chaos of a poorly managed work zone. There is a severe lack of situational awareness from both the scooter driver and the forklift operator. Industrial yards require clear, designated pathways for vehicles and pedestrians, good lighting, and for all personnel to remain alert. In a poorly lit workshop, 2 men are working on the floor near what appears to be a compressed gas cylinder. Suddenly, it explodes in a massive fireball. Gas cylinders are potential bombs if mishandled. They must always be stored upright, secured from falling, and inspected for damage before use. A man operates a large industrial lathe. leaning over the rapidly spinning chuck. His loose jacket sleeve gets snagged, and he is instantly and violently pulled into the machine, spinning at a terrifying speed before a coworker hits the emergency stop. This is a classic entanglement accident. The number one rule when working with rotating machinery is absolutely no loose clothing, untied long hair, or jewelry. These items can be grabbed in a fraction of a second. Additionally, a chuck shield could have prevented this contact. At a gas station next to a busy roundabout, a chaotic car accident occurs. One of the involved cars rolls backward, out of control, directly into the station forecourt, striking an unsuspecting attendant sitting in a chair. This incident underscores the risk of working near live traffic. Protective barriers, like bollards, are essential to shield work areas from errant vehicles. A large truck reverses toward a loading bay, while a pedestrian walks directly into its path from behind. The driver, with no visibility in this massive blind spot, continues backing up and runs the person over completely. This is a tragic and preventable blind spot accident. Large vehicles must be equipped with functioning backup alarms and cameras. Crucially, a dedicated spotter should always guide a reversing truck, maintaining constant visual contact with the driver. In a busy shipping yard, a man walks across the pavement while completely absorbed by his phone. He fails to notice an approaching forklift and steps directly into its path, getting struck and knocked down. This is a clear case of distracted walking in a high-risk environment. Using a phone while walking in an active yard with heavy machinery should be strictly forbidden. Pedestrians must maintain full situational awareness at all times. A mechanic performs welding work underneath a car on a lift. Sparks from his tool ignite a flammable liquid on the floor, likely spilled fuel, and the vehicle erupts into a massive ball of fire. The mechanic is forced to scramble to safety from the inferno. This is a failure of hot work safety procedures. Before any welding or grinding, the area must be completely cleared of all flammable materials, including liquids, vapors, and oily rags. A fire extinguisher must be within arm's reach, and it is also standard practice to disconnect the vehicle's battery. Following a traffic accident, a victim lies injured on the road. As bystanders rush to help, a car driving in the opposite lane fails to notice the person on the ground and runs them over. This tragic event highlights the critical need to secure an accident scene immediately. Using hazard lights, warning triangles, or directing traffic is essential to protect the injured and first responders from secondary collisions, which are often just as deadly as the initial crash. In a poorly constructed room, a person is sleeping on a cot. Without warning, the concrete slab roof above them gives way, collapsing and burying the individual under tons of heavy rubble. Rescuers immediately rush in and begin frantically digging through the debris with their bare hands to pull the victim out. This catastrophic structural failure is a direct consequence of subpar construction and lack of proper reinforcement. It underscores the vital importance of adhering to building codes and using qualified engineers and builders, as any shortcuts in overhead construction can have fatal consequences for those below. In a repair yard, a mechanic is working on a truck with its cab tilted forward to access the engine. Another man works on a pickup truck parked directly in front of it. Suddenly, the hydraulic prop holding the massive cab fails, and it slams shut, crushing the man working on the pickup. This is a critical failure of basic maintenance safety. Never trust hydraulics alone. A secondary mechanical safety lock or a properly rated support brace must always be used when working under any raised heavy component. During a demolition, workers use a small front-end loader and a makeshift hoist to lower a large metal smokestack. One worker stands directly in the fall path, guiding the base. The temporary rigging fails, and the massive pipe crashes down, striking the worker and pinning him. His colleagues rushed to try and lift the immense weight. This incident is a textbook example of disregarding rigging safety. Never stand under a suspended load. All lifting operations must be planned by a competent person, using properly rated equipment and maintaining a clear and respected drop zone at all times. Men are attempting to move a large, top-heavy commercial refrigerator or vending machine. They are using an improper method, trying to slide and pivot it by hand without proper equipment like a dolly or pallet jack. As they maneuver the appliance, its high center of gravity causes it to become unstable. It begins to tip over, and one of the men is unable to get out of the way. The incredibly heavy machine falls directly on top of him, crushing him against the floor. Moving heavy and tall objects requires careful planning and the use of appropriate mechanical aids to prevent them from tipping over. During nighttime road construction, a worker in a high-visibility vest walks near a large wheeled excavator. The operator begins to swing the machine's cab to reposition it. The worker is standing in the excavator's massive blind spot. As the cab rotates, the heavy counterweight swings around and pins the unsuspecting man against a stack of concrete barriers, crushing him. Swing radius accidents are a common and deadly hazard. Ground personnel must never enter the swing radius of an excavator without first getting confirmation from the operator that they have been seen. Inside a workshop, two men are performing maintenance on a large industrial machine. They are positioned directly underneath a heavy, suspended component of the apparatus. It appears the component was either improperly supported or the lifting mechanism failed. Suddenly, the entire assembly gives way and collapses downwards, crushing both workers beneath its immense weight. This is a fatal violation of a primary safety rule. Never work under a suspended load. Heavy components must be physically secured with certified blocks or safety stands before any personnel are allowed to work underneath them. In a chaotic street intersection, a pedestrian begins to cross the road. At the same time, a wheeled excavator makes a turn, its operator's view obstructed. The operator does not see the pedestrian, and the front of the heavy machine strikes her, knocking her to the ground. Continuing its turn, the operator, still unaware of the collision, drives directly over her. Heavy equipment operating in public spaces poses an immense risk.